Everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I always intro that they're exciting. I'm always excited to be on and talking to people that I enjoy. I enjoy their work. I enjoy the things that they put out in the world, and delighted to be joined on this episode by author and artist. I'll say author because I think you do authoring as part of art. Caitlin Yarsky. So, do you want me to call you Kate or Caitlin?
Keaton's fine. Sure.
Okay, Caitlin,
Yeah.
Caitlin works. Thank you so much for jumping on a Zoom call with me and participating in an episode of the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Sure, my pleasure. I do have a confession, which is that I almost met you in person because I think you were scheduled to be at GalaxyCon last year, which is in Raleigh, not too far
Yes.
from where I live. And I came for like one day. It was the Thursday when nobody else had sort of shown up yet, but I did get
Mm.
to sort of roam around a little bit. So almost met you in person, but not
Oh,
quite.
sorry
So,
about that.
oh no worries. I did get to meet the lead actor from Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was sort of in the
Tim
same room.
Curry.
Or no, it was Barry. Is it Barry Bostwick? Is that right?
Oh, yeah, Barry Boswick. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Tim Curry would have been awesome though.
yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah. But yeah, maybe at some point I will get to interact in physical space, but nice to be in the Zoom space with you. I always like to ask people, because I'm a comics fan, what it was that drew you to visual worlds and creating in comics.
See, I mean, I don't really know. I've always it's funny because I've told people, for a while that like I didn't really get into comics until I was in my early 30s when I started like drawing them, but I really have been drawing them my whole life. Like I drew them on my own, like little skits and stuff, almost like like funny little like I guess they're kind of like web comics before there was web comics, or were web comics. So it's like I would draw those on my own. I thought they were funny. And then like, I um drew some comics in high school, and I drew a comic to get when I transferred colleges, I did a comic about one of my internships as my essay to get into the next school. Because I just called the admissions office and was like, can I do a comic instead of an essay? And they were like, yeah. And I was like,
That's
cool.
great.
So I didn't know you could do that. Um, and then yeah, I was doing them intermittently through my through schooling. So like I guess it's just I never thought about it in that way, like that I was like a comics person. I just drew them myself. And then like the first like major like long form comic I got into was well like I read Mouse, and that was amazing. But the one that kind of hooked me was The Sandman.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it's almost like not fair because I feel like it's like watching Cowboy Bebop as your first anime, and it like almost ruins other stories for you because it's just like that's just the cream of the crop, and you're just like oh, this is what comics are. Oh, let's get more of that. And then I was just like, I was still excited by comics, but like it was a little bit of that like, oh, I just read like the best, some of the best that there is out there. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that blew my mind. And then, but I was mostly an art, like a fine art major or person, like in high school, and then a little bit, and then I went into illustration in college, and then after school, I got into games because that's where most of the jobs are, honestly, like the study jobs. It's in games for artists these days. Because I'm not really a big gamer, but that's how, I needed to pay off my student loans and all this other stuff. So I got into games, and I did that for a long time. I got into, and I'm still doing that actually. I still have that a game job. I work for Way Forward Games in California.
Oh,
But
cool.
anyway, so at some point I left my first game job and went freelance and decided to try out comics. And I just like drew a 10-page thing on my own that I wrote, and like started using that as like my portfolio piece, because I realized like we had to have a comic to show around if you want to get into comics, right? So
Hmm.
so yeah, that was how I first got into that.
Well, I did not realize that you were also in the world of gaming. I know that there are a lot of people that
Mhm.
either start out in animation or gaming and then move to
Mhm.
comics, but you must be very busy doing both at the same time.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of well known that comics doesn't pay a ton, even if you're doing them regularly. So I definitely still have the game job just because it's secure enough, to keep me. So it's like I do juggle those two things, and it is tiring. But
I'm sure.
it's worth it just because comics are just so fulfilling to me because you have so much more control than you would in games. I love the people I work with in games. It's not a bad industry to be in, but if you're looking for something that will be like very like to be really self-expressive, I think that's comics is you can't really beat comics. So
Uh, so the next question you're welcome to take on either from the gaming perspective, the
mhm.
comics perspective, or a mixture of both, which is the question about that vision that you want to bring to your work, that particular style or vision that you really want to carry through for the viewer.
I mean, I had a very specific, I kind of wanted to be Brian Froud and or Alan Lee when I was growing up. I loved like the fairies book that they did together, and I loved, Labyrinth and Dark Crystal and stuff like that, like this
Hmm.
very kind of like dark fantasy kind of nature centric kind of stuff. And I definitely want to do some story like that, but I feel like by the time you're in your 30s, you've lived so many lives and you've done so many things that there are more worlds for you that you've kind of built in in you that you want to share. So, um, so many different influences and inspirations that you want to like that have shaped you. So, yeah, I mean, I definitely want to convey. I want to bring out a lot of like the fantasy, some sci I mean, I love sci-fi, but I don't like drawing sci-fi really. It's like not, I don't, all those machines, I just can't,
Oh
it's
yeah,
not
I
fun
can
for
see
me.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people love that stuff. Some people, it's like their whole thing. I cannot do it. And, like I identify so hard with like Fiona Staples, who had to draw that like spaceship or whatever for Saga, and she was like, what if it's just a big plant? And he's like, okay. And I was like, that would be me. That would be like, can I just draw a spaceship that's like a plant? Um, so yeah, I mean, definitely fantasy and escapism, but I definitely also want to, tackle some hard subjects. I think that some of the best fantasy and sci-fi out there is does both. It gives you some of that escapism, some of that you can just be absorbed into that world, but then at the same time it tackles really hard subjects that if I was like I wouldn't necessarily want to read about those in a nonfiction setting. I like when they're couched in these worlds because it kind of makes it safer somehow. Or
Hmm.
um, like I love how like in Battlestar Galactica they brought up so many subjects that would have been
Uh,
taboo at the time because they were in space. They were like, we're in
yep.
space, so it's fine. you know?
Yeah.
Like suicide bombers and like abortion and like all these crazy subjects, and you're just like, holy shit, how did they get away with this? And they're like, because it's robots in space, that's why.
Space. Yeah. Yeah, I love that aspect of fantasy too, the commentary. And when you get to the end of it, you go, "Oh, that was actually about like next door." But it
Right.
just happened to be set in space.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I have to give love to both Black Hammer Reborn and Bliss, two of my favorite of your works, both by publishers that I love, Dark Horse and Image. And so, anything that you would want to share about your work on those series for readers that need a really good comic, because you mentioned Sandman, and Sandman it's the pinnacle. But I am also a Black Hammer fan and really enjoyed what you did with Bliss as well.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean, uh, Bliss for me was uh a great exercise in like exploring what I wanted to show. And I mean so was Coyotes, but I feel like I was learning so much on Coyotes that I feel like Bliss was like I got to kind of level up a little bit, um and just really kind of go crazy with my own style. And I guess, yeah, I mean there are a lot of hard subjects in Bliss, addiction and fatherhood and all sorts of things. And it's so I really like the story, and I just I loved working with Sean because he gives you really are a partner. And so like, we would talk about the story together and where it's going to go. And we would talk about like the style, and he let me do whatever I wanted really. Like there was so little, he just trusted me, which I really appreciated. You know what I mean? Like he had the story he wanted to tell, But he was also open to suggestions, and he would be like, there was no panel breakdowns, there was no in the script. It was just a straight up script. Um, so there was no like hardly any character descriptions or anything. So I got to design all those things. Like I basically cast it, with people in my town
I love
who
it.
came over and were like acting out the whole thing for, photo reference. So like it was really fun. And then, there would be these mobsters, and I'd be like, hey, Sean, could they be like lizards? And he's like, yeah, sure. So, like, the mobsters were lizards now. Um, so that was a really good experience. And yeah, if you're into Guillermo del Toro or uh I don't know, I have so many influences I can't even name them all. If you like Sylvain Chomet or any like hand drawn animated stuff, like I have a lot of influence from that. Go for it. Black Hammer is very different. It's a very different world. It's a amazing story. Like I cannot believe I got to draw Black Hammer. Like I didn't know that's what I was applying for when I sent my portfolio out. I didn't even know who the author was. Somebody told me like, hey, there's this big project, might want to send your stuff over. So I did, and then I got it, and I hadn't read Black Hammer yet. So then I read Black Hammer, and I was like, oh my God, I'm continuing this story. Holy crap. Um, but yeah, the character development's amazing. The family dynamic stuff is amazing. Like everything about it is great. And there's a lot of like uh nods to classic superhero stuff that I don't even necessarily pick up on because I didn't grow up reading that stuff, but I think people would really enjoy it if they did.
Yeah, and it's from the mind of Jeff Lemire. I mean, Jeff
Yes,
Lemire's,
he's
yeah,
brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, and it just views the whole world in a completely different way. And
Mhm.
Black Hammer has those notes and nods to superheroes, but it's totally its own unique kind of
Yes,
vision too, which I appreciate a lot.
totally.
Yeah. Um, oh, you mentioned something else there that I was going to follow up on. You mentioned the character reference photos
Hmm.
for Bliss. That is fascinating to hear that part of the process because folks don't often talk about that. And I'm thinking about some photos that I've seen that Alison Bechtel did for Fun Home of
Hmm.
getting like character references and pieces like that. So is that
Hmm.
normally a part of the process, or was that something you did for that work?
Oh yeah, I mean reference, it's so funny because I think some people still, especially when they're in school, they think that reference is like a bad word or something. I personally, this is like controversial even to say, but I don't like when people trace. I think that kind of like takes away from the creativity, and I think it's too much of a crutch for some people. But you can, I mean, I use reference just having it next to me looking at it, and it's really helpful. Sometimes I'm not even using the same pose, but it's just a good jumping off point. But for Bliss, I was lucky enough that I was in a community where I had a bunch of friends like were happy to do this. They just acted out the story, and I got to like take pictures of I thumbnailed every panel, and then I had them come over, and then for like 2 hours we acted out the whole thing. Um, so then I had the whole story kind of like there, and it was really nice. And eventually, like the pandemic happened, and I had to kind of make do with what I had. But and I didn't really even change the way they looked that much. Like I kind of exaggerated their features, but I kind of picked really interesting looking people in my town, like friends of mine and stuff. It was funny because my friend Jackie, she plays Mabel, and she came over when everybody was there, and was looking around her, and she was like, "Hey, wait a minute." She was like, everyone here is very like unique looking. What's going on? But it just helps with the drawing process. They were people I wanted to draw, and people I wanted to like exaggerate their features and stuff. So um, yeah, and so I have folders of every page that I have like panel one, panel two, panel three, and like all the shots and everything. I can't do that for every project. And I moved a bunch, so I'm in Portland now, and like most of the time I find stock photos, and that's what I'm like referencing when I'm looking at stuff, or like I'll find like an actor or somebody I kind of want to base the look off loosely of a character, and luckily they have like a million shots of different angles of their face, so it makes it easier. And then I have these like these big it's called Pure Ref. It's like a really good app that you can put like all these different photo references in one place. So you can kind of like zoom and pan around and like whenever you, so it's really helpful. Yeah, I think people should talk about reference more. I think it's a necessity. It's and for objects too, like trying to find like, oh, what is this? What does a car look like from underneath, at this angle or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And maybe the best way to draw a spaceship for that matter.
right. Yeah, for sure.
So the last question, and you're welcome to touch on anything that I've not mentioned, anything that you want to make sure to share. I always like to give folks the space to share upcoming projects, pieces that you're working on that you can talk about, even cryptic nods to things that are coming that you can't necessarily talk about, all of those sort of
Mhm.
things, and upcoming events if you have conventions that you're going to be going to. I know we're heading into summer, so
Right.
I imagine some of those will be bubbling up pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm taking a slight break from cons. I did a lot of cons last year, so I'm gonna do Baltimore Con, and that's all I got scheduled so far. And I think that's in September or October. I can't remember. And as far as projects going, there's a lot of stuff in the air. I have two that I'm working on right now. One is a short story. It's part of Swan Songs by W. Maxwell Prince that he's doing for Image. Um, and then and that should be out like late summer, early fall. And then I have a short story I'm doing for Three Worlds, Three Moons. That's a new publisher. And aside from that, I have a short story for DC I'm doing for an anthology. Um, can't talk too much about that one. And then I have two or three different stories that are in pitch mode that I'm talking to some publishers about. Because my next step is to do my own write and draw my own series.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So
Yeah.
stepping into the both the scripting and the
Hmm.
drawing as well. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wonderful things to come. Wonderful things to
I'm
come.
excited.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always enjoy your work, so I'll be looking for those pieces to come. And I've heard really good things about Baltimore Comic Con. So, from what I
Me
understand,
too.
I've never been, but that sounds like a really good one.
Yeah, same. And I mean, I picked it because I heard good things and also because my family is in DC now. So figured it's a good excuse to see them and, you know,
For sure. All right. Well, thank you so much for the conversation. Glad to share about your work and glad to have you on anytime.
oh, awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.